The rain was coming down so hard it felt like the sky itself was breaking apart, and in the middle of that storm, under the flickering streetlight of a deserted bus stop, she looked up at him with tears mixing into the rain on her pale cheeks and whispered the words that would change both of their lives forever. She said she couldn't walk, told him to leave her there, said she didn't want to be anyone's burden anymore. For a moment, the world went silent except for the thunder rolling above them, and Daniel Harper, a single father who already carried more weight on his shoulders than most men twice his age, he felt his heart split in two. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, in people showing up for each other even when it's hard, take a second to like this video, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Because stories like this remind us why humanity still matters. Daniel had not planned to be anyone's hero that night. He had just finished a double shift at the warehouse, his back aching and his hands rough from lifting boxes for 10 straight hours. His 6-year-old daughter, Lily Harper, was at home with Mrs. Thompson, the elderly neighbor who had practically adopted them after Daniel's wife, Rebecca, passed away from a sudden aneurysm 3 years earlier. Since that day, Daniel had lived on autopilot: work, home, school runs, late-night tears he hid from his daughter, and the constant fear that he was failing her. Every decision he made revolved around Lily. Every sacrifice felt necessary. Love had become something he gave, not something he expected to receive. He first noticed her because she wasn't moving. The bus stop was usually empty at that hour, but the storm had driven most people indoors long before midnight. She sat on the wet pavement beside the bench instead of on it, her long brown hair plastered to her face, her thin sweater soaked through, her hands trembling. Daniel almost kept walking. In a city that had taught him to mind his business, to avoid trouble, to protect what little stability he had built for his daughter, stopping felt risky. But something about the way she stared at the ground, like she had already given up on the world noticing her, pulled him closer. Her name, he would later learn, was Emily Carter. When he asked if she was okay, she didn't answer at first. She just shook her head. And when he reached down to help her up, she flinched and said the words that cut through the rain: she couldn't walk, told him to leave her, said she had already called someone who wasn't coming, said it didn't matter anyway. There was no drama in her voice, no attempt to gain sympathy. Just exhaustion. The kind that settles into the bones after too many disappointments. Daniel could see then that one of her legs was twisted unnaturally. Not broken, but weak, braced with a one medical support that had slipped during what looked like a fall. Later, he would find out she had been in a car accident 2 years earlier that left her with nerve damage. Some days she could walk fine. Other days, the pain was unbearable. That night, the storm and the slippery pavement had betrayed her. He looked around. No cars. No open shops. No taxis. His phone battery was at 5%. And home was still 15 blocks away. She repeated it softly, almost pleading with him not to care. Leave me. Daniel thought about Lily asleep in her small bed with the purple blankets covered in cartoon stars. He thought about how she had once scraped her knee at the park and cried that she didn't want to walk anymore, and how he had picked her up without a second thought, even though she was getting heavier every day. He remembered how Rebecca used to say that love is not measured by convenience but by commitment. And in that storm, something inside him made a decision. Without another word, Daniel crouched down and carefully slid one arm under Emily's knees and the other behind her back. She gasped in shock as he lifted her, not because she was heavy, but because she clearly hadn't expected him to stay. The rain soaked through his jacket, and his muscles screamed in protest from the long shift, but he adjusted his grip and began walking. Each step felt like a mile. The pavement was slick, and twice he nearly slipped. Emily kept telling him he didn't have to do this, that she lived too far, that she would figure it out. But Daniel didn't answer. He focused on breathing. On balance. On not letting her feel the tremor in his arms. He didn't know why he was doing it. Maybe because he remembered what it felt like when the hospital hallway had been empty after Rebecca died, when people stopped calling after the first few weeks, when the world moved on and he was left holding a child and a grief too big for his chest. Maybe he saw in Emily the same quiet surrender he had once felt. Halfway there, his phone died. The rain intensified. His back throbbed. He could feel blisters forming on his palms where her wet sweater slipped against his skin. But he didn't stop. When they finally reached her apartment building, a rundown brick structure with flickering lights in the hallway, Daniel's legs were shaking. He carried her up 2 flights of stairs because the elevator had been broken for months. By the time he set her gently down on her couch, he was drenched, breathless, and utterly exhausted. Emily stared at him like she had just witnessed something impossible. No one had carried her before. Not since the accident. Not since her fiancé, who had promised to stay, decided her recovery was too much and left. Friends had slowly disappeared. Invitations stopped coming. She had learned to make herself small, to decline help before it was offered, to believe she was, in fact, a burden. Daniel didn't stay long. He made sure she had ice for her leg, helped her find her medication, and scribbled his name and number on a piece of mail from her table. He told her to call if she needed groceries or a ride to the doctor. Then he left, walking home in wet clothes, unsure why his chest felt lighter despite his aching body. He didn't expect to hear from her again. But 3 days later, as he was packing Lily's lunch for school, his phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. It was Emily. She didn't ask for help. She just said thank you. And somehow, that simple gratitude cracked open a door neither of them realized had been closed. Over the next few weeks, their lives began to intersect in small, ordinary ways. Daniel would stop by after work to fix a leaking faucet or carry laundry downstairs. Emily, who worked remotely as a graphic designer, started designing colorful bookmarks for Lily, who adored her instantly. Lily saw Emily's leg brace and asked questions with innocent curiosity, and instead of pity, there was fascination and acceptance. But the real challenge came when Daniel's landlord announced the rent was increasing again. Daniel's overtime hours had been cut, and no matter how many extra shifts he begged for, the math didn't work. He spent nights at the kitchen table with bills spread out like accusations. He considered selling his truck. He considered moving Lily to a smaller, rougher neighborhood he had worked so hard to escape. Emily noticed the shadows under his eyes before he said anything. And one evening, when Lily was coloring at the coffee table, Emily asked him why he always acted like he had to carry the world alone. He shrugged it off at first. Pride had been his armor for years. But something about her steady gaze made him honest. He admitted he was scared. Scared of failing his daughter. Scared of not being enough. Emily listened. Really listened. Then she told him about a freelance contract she had just landed with a major publishing company, one that required more hours than she could physically handle alone. She needed someone reliable to help with deliveries, printing coordination, and logistics. It wasn't glamorous. But it paid well. Daniel hesitated. Accepting help felt foreign. But this wasn't charity. It was partnership. They began working together. Daniel handled the physical tasks. Emily managed the creative side. Lily became their unofficial assistant, proudly organizing papers and announcing deadlines. Slowly, the financial pressure eased. The apartment didn't feel like it was closing in anymore. But the real transformation wasn't financial. It was emotional. Daniel stopped seeing himself as a man surviving tragedy and started seeing himself as someone capable of building something new. Emily stopped apologizing for her limitations and started recognizing her strength. They both learned that vulnerability was not weakness. Months later, on a sunny afternoon that felt like a reward after endless rain, Daniel took Lily to the park where they had first scattered Rebecca's ashes. Emily joined them, walking carefully but confidently beside them. As Lily ran ahead, Daniel realized that the stormy night at the bus stop had not been random. It had been a turning point. If this story has touched your heart so far, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness still exists, and leave a comment to support stories that celebrate compassion. And before the ending, I want to ask you something special. Please comment the word "carry" if you believe that sometimes the strongest thing we can do is lift someone else when they can't stand. Because here is what shocked Emily the most that night: it wasn't just that Daniel carried her through the storm. It was that he never once made her feel heavy. And here is what changed Daniel forever: it wasn't just that he helped her. It was that, in helping her, he realized he didn't have to face life alone anymore. A year after that storm, in the same spot under that once flickering streetlight, Daniel stood holding Emily's hands as Lily giggled nearby. There was no dramatic proposal, no grand speech. Just quiet certainty. The kind built from shared struggles and ordinary miracles. Emily looked at him with tears in her eyes, and not from pain this time, but from gratitude, and Daniel understood something simple yet profound. Sometimes the people who say leave me are the ones who have been left too many times before. And sometimes, all it takes to change a life is choosing to stay. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone who carried you or someone you need to carry today, please engage with this video, share your thoughts below, and let kindness ripple further than this screen. Because somewhere out there, under someone else's storm, a single act of compassion might be waiting to rewrite two lives forever.